Hello, I'm David Breeden. I'm the Senior Minister at First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, a historically humanist congregation, and this is Coffee and Wisdom. We're starting a new series today looking at the commitments of humanists, and I'm going to call this Humanism and the Human Condition. What do humanists want, and how do we go about living our lives, are the real question here. I have a little gift going on here. This is from a Netflix television show called Lucifer, in which Lucifer, yes, Satan himself, comes to earth and does some police investigating. His special power is that he's able to hypnotize people and ask them, what do you desire? What is it you most desire? And thereby, he gains control essentially over that person. And guess what? Bertrand Russell, a humanist, got there before the TV show did. First off, I do want to do a little defining of humanism. Humanism is a way of thinking and living that focuses on human action in relation to the well-being of sentient beings and the planet. That's going to be my go-to today. Elevator speeches about humanism, humanism is, definition, etc. Very difficult to really nail down, since we don't, as we talked about last week, have a humanist pope to tell us how we have to think. So when you have a bunch of free thinkers, how do you define what those free thinkers do? I'm going to be looking at it from this perspective, though, as a way of thinking and living. So mind and action that focuses on human action, not the supernatural actions, in relation to the well-being of sentient beings. That would be human beings, but also all the animals and the planet. And so let's look and see if we can make that definition work. I do want to talk a little bit about the humanist Bertrand Russell, 1872 to 1970, writer, philosopher, socialist, pacifist, spent time in jail during the First World War. He was British as a pacifist, also pacifistic during the Second World War and on into the 1960s and 70s. He won the Nobel Prize, not in peace, but in literature in 1950. And his acceptance speech is called What Desires Are Politically Important. Now, 1950, 5 years after the end of the Second World War, into the atomic age, of course, and the Korean War was just beginning. And he does mention that in his opening remarks, the beginning of the Korean War. So he's looking at how do we do some kind of world in which people can live and flourish in a peaceful existence. What is it that is keeping us from doing that is the question. And his answer is all human activity is prompted by desire. Yep, just like the Lucifer TV show. All human activity is prompted by desire. There is a wholly fallacious theory advanced by some earnest moralists to the effect that it is possible to resist desire in the interests of duty and moral principle. I say this is fallacious, not because no man, human, ever acts from a sense of duty, but because duty has no hold on him unless he desires to be dutiful. Now, notice the way that he's pushing this particular kind of reasoning. Desire at that time was considered to be the thing that Buddhists were working against. Nowadays, we call it reaching and things like that. The real Pali definition is a little difficult to figure into English, but desire. But he says we don't want to resist desire. We don't want to get past desire. Desire is what drives the human animal. But the trick is to get your desires into an order. Very interesting way to think about this, I think. Humans, differ from other animals in one important respect, and that is that he has some desires which are, so to speak, infinite, which can never be fully gratified, and which would keep him restless even in paradise. The boa constrictor, when he has had an adequate meal, goes to sleep and does not wake until he needs another meal. Human beings, for the most part, are not like this, And so he names 4 infinite desires. And these are what he sees as the problem with the human condition. First off is acquisitiveness. Nowadays, we often call this the hedonic treadmill. The more you got, the more you want. The more you get, the more you want. The more, and so acquisitiveness never ends. It is an infinite desire. Rivalry. We always want to be beating someone else, right? But the problem is that when you beat this group or person, guess what? There's another rivalry always to find. So we go from rivalry to rivalry to rivalry. Also vanity or narcissism, and then the love of power. Love of power is greatly increased by the experience of power, and this applies to petty power as well as that of potentates. So any kind of power feeds on itself. We love it so much that we just keep trying to get more and more and more. So these are infinite desires: acquisitiveness, rivalry, vanity, and love of power. He says that is what drives war, capitalism, the bad things in the world that are destroying the planet. Remember, this is 1950. The antidote is the desire to be dutiful. Can we put a desire to be dutiful in the place of these very human desires, but desires that cannot be fulfilled? Can we do that is the question. Fear is in itself degrading, he says. It easily becomes an obsession. It produces hate of that which is feared, and it leads headlong to excesses of cruelty. Nothing has so beneficent an effect on human beings as security. And again, fear is the greatest driver very often, especially in political matters. He's saying we have to create a sense of security and so that people can flourish and stop the fear, right? And of course, we know in politics, fear is always the first go-to, but can we instead talk about security and get over the talk of fear? And this is his conclusion. I would say, in conclusion, that if what I have said is right, the main thing needed to make the world happy is intelligence. And this, after all, is an optimistic conclusion because intelligence is a thing that can be fostered by known methods of education. And so this great philosopher, mathematician, who had been working all of his life for security and peace, etc., his final idea, his final conclusion is that what we need to do is foster human intelligence. Yes, the little poster here is from UNICEF. Education is every girl's right. And I think, it seems almost too simple, but in some ways, the most profound observation about humanity is that if we can educate people, we get a more peaceful and flourishing populace. So I find that a very interesting way that he ended way back in 1950, but did anyone listen, or who has still been listening? So what is the duty of a humanist, I would ask, if we are supposed to get rid of these infinite desires of acquisitiveness, rivalry, vanity, and love of power? How do we go about doing that? What do we put in its place? And as I said, that's why I have this definition of humanism. Humanism is a way of thinking and living that focuses on human action in relation to the well-being of sentient beings in the planet. Way back when in this series, when we were talking about utilitarianism and when it came along in the 19th century, still these ideas go on that if we can put in place of the destructive desires something about duty to each other and the planet, if we can replace that, we can start going towards something a lot more constructive in the world. And that is the Nobel Prize speech from Bertrand Russell. I wanted to give you this little thought for the day. This is from Ta-Nehisi Coates. This is a little meme from the Humanist UK that we've talked about before in this series. He said, "I was made for the library, not the classroom. The classroom was the jail of other people's interests. The library was open, unending, free. And how humanist is that as a way of thinking about education? Let me go in the library, and I will get to educating myself on what I need to know." So a little thought for the day from Ta-Nehisi Coates, an American, but from the Humanist UK. Thanks for listening today. I did have this idea because I was reading Brain Pickings by Maria Popova. If you haven't subscribed to this, it's quite good. Maria Popova goes through various of the great artistic texts of the world. She's very knowledgeable, and she picks out some really brilliant things and brings them to you in your email. So sign up for Brain Pickings, and they'll give you some good ideas as well. Thanks for listening. You can follow us on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And if you want to help us out and keep this idea of humanism going strong, visit PayPal or firstunitarian.org/donate and help us out. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you again tomorrow.